Okay, chapter 13, the Kjack. All right. One morning at breakfast, Fritz said, "Our big ostrich is a splendid horse. We also have a sled to transport our provisions and a ship and a canoe anchored in Providence Bay. Now we need a boat that will glide over the water like an ostrich does on land. I have something very unique in mind, but I can't make it alone. Are each of you willing to help me?" "Well, first you must tell us your idea," I said, "and then we will vote whether or not to make it a family project." As Elizabeth cleared away the dishes from the breakfast table, Fritz outlined his plan. "I've read that the people of Greenland have a vessel that skims lightly over the water. They call it a Kjack. I see no reason why we can't make one ourselves." "Well, what is this Kjack like?" asked Jack. "Well, it's sort of a canoe in the form of a shell," Fritz explained. "It's so light that you can carry it on your shoulders, and once you've reached land." "The idea certainly has merit," I said. "What materials would you use?" "Well, the Greenlanders used walrus skins for the body of the boat, but we could substitute seal skins. Strips of whalebone, bamboo canes, and rushes will make up the sides and give it form." It sounds like a great idea," I exclaimed. "I hereby vote that we begin construction on Fritz's proposed Kjack this very day." "I second the motion," said Ernest. "Me too," piped up Francis. With all 5 of us working, we had the skeleton of the Kjack ready the next day. We then covered the interior with a coat of gum and moss and pulled the seal skins down over the outside. We sewed them together in the middle where they met and coated the outside with gum elastic to keep out the water. While I fashioned oars from bamboo poles, Elizabeth made Fritz a special airtight suit that molded him from head to toe. Kind of like scuba diving. Like a scuba outfit. While I fashioned, I did that. Okay, hold on. The outfit was made of linen, prepared with a solution of India rubber. The seams were coated with a thick gum and made from the dried juices of tropical plants that stretched easily and did not allow water to seep in. Fritz was given a pipe that he could use for breathing when swimming underwater. So they've really made a snorkel and like snorkel and their little dive suit. And we would call this, we wouldn't call this a canoe because a canoe would be open all the way. But when you have a small, lightweight, long, but lightweight boat like this that really sits on top of the water and has an opening just for you to sit down in, the word we would use is kayak. We would call it a kayak, spelled K-A-Y-A-K. So a little bit different, but same type boat. All right. Our first reaction when we finally saw Fritz dressed in his suit was to burst out laughing. But he gravely plunged into the water and struck out for Shark Island. We followed him in the Kjack and arrived at the same time. "My outfit worked beautifully," Fritz cried triumphantly as he removed the hood. "See, there's not a drop of water inside." "Well, now Mother will have to make each of us a suit like that," Jack said. That trip to Shark's Island was very successful. We were delighted to see that our birds, antelope, and rabbits were thriving in their new home. After several hours of exploring the island, we decided this was the ideal spot to erect the small fortification for protection in case of enemy attack. This required weeks of hard, back-breaking work, for we had to move our 2 cannons to the island and construct a wooden platform for them. It was a happy day when we gingerly set the cannons in place top of the platform and faced them toward the open sea. Then we raised the Swiss flag up the pole and watched it wave gaily in the breeze. After our mission on Shark Island was completed, Fritz continued his explorations by Kjack. On one occasion, when his goal was to master the swift current of Jackal's Bay, he was thrown back into the ocean and nearly drowned. We discovered him hours afterward, huddled on a large rock, all alone, except for a walrus he had killed with a harpoon. Later on, he cut off the walrus's head, stuffed it, and attached it to the bow of his Kjack, which from that time on he referred to as the walrus. All right. That's the end of chapter 13. So now they've kind of built for themselves a little bit of a, they called it a fortress, but it's kind of going to be like a little area where if somebody would come, they would see people maybe coming toward the island, and they felt that they needed to have a safe place up high where they could protect themselves and have some kind of weapons or ammunition if they needed to, and they lugged the cannons up there. So it makes me wonder if this is kind of foreshadowing, if they're building this fortress, maybe we are going to encounter someone arriving at the island. I don't know. Okay, so let's see. Chapter 14 is called A Mysterious Message. Chapter 14, A Mysterious Message. And this computer always cuts my slides off, so it's not like I just need to move this over. It's just that the computer cuts it off. So this should say, A Mysterious Message 10 years later. But this has absolutely nothing to do with the mysterious message, but this is going to be something, of course, that we're going to read about in chapter 14. And if you know what these are, okay, I'm not going to say anything yet, but you can make a guess as to what their next big thing that they find is. They're always finding something. In every chapter, you know, they're finding something. All right, A Mysterious Message. 10 years had passed since our arrival in this part of the world. My sons were no longer boys but grown men. Fritz was 24 years old. Jack was 23. Ernest was 20, and Francis was 18. It was almost impossible now to curtail their jaunts into unknown regions of the island. One day, Fritz left on an expedition that was to change all of our lives. He set sail at daybreak and was gone the entire afternoon. Shortly before dusk, Elizabeth approached me frantically. You must go in search of Fritz, my dear. I'm so worried about him. To relieve my wife's anxiety, my sons and I set out for Shark Island, where we fired the cannon for a signal to Fritz. A few minutes later, we saw a black spot on the sea. Looking through my spyglass, I saw that it was my wandering son. Fritz, you gave us quite a fright, I cried as he beached his kayak. Thank heavens you are safe. Oh, I'm fine, Father, said Fritz, unconcerned. Wait until you see what I have. I think I've made a discovery that is worth more than all the treasures on earth. Oh, tell us about it, Ernest begged. Well, he began, I was anxious to explore the eastern coast of the island, for none of us have been there before. As I sailed among the shoals and rocks covered with the nests of seagulls, I saw sea lions, elephants, and walrus all playing in the water. Naturally, I was in a hurry to get out of their way and rowed as fast as I could. Suddenly, I came to a magnificent natural bridge, which I passed under. The bridge led me to a cave and out into a beautiful calm bay. Peering down at the azure blue water, I saw bed after bed of giant oysters. And oysters they're mollusks. They're bivalves, meaning that they're going to open like this, having two shells. And there are small ones, like if you go to the grocery store in the seafood thing, you can buy clams or not clams. You can buy clams, mussels, or oysters, different times of the year. But these were giant oysters, is what he found. And one thing that you can find in oysters, not all of them, but in some, are pearls, okay? And oysters make pearls when a little piece of sand or something gets inside their shell and it irritates them, and they cover that. They continue to make a calcium covering around that little irritant, okay? And that becomes the pearl. So I caught some with a hook and tossed them over on the sand. However, when I opened them, instead of finding a nice fat oyster, there was only hard, gritty meat inside. Then my knife hit some little round, hard stones, the size of peas. I lifted them out and held them up to the light. Pearls, I cried in ecstasy, real pearls. See, Father, I brought back a whole box full. They really are pearls of rare quality, I exclaimed as we examined the contents of Fritz's box. Son, you've discovered a valuable treasure. Something else happened on the trip, Fritz announced. I found this linen note tied to the foot of a seagull, not far from the oyster bed. Let me see it, I cried, opening up the message. What does it say? Asked Francis eagerly. It's written in English, I said, and it reads, "Save the poor shipwrecked sailor on the smoking rock." "How mysterious," cried Jack. "Father, what do you think this means?" "It means that we are no longer alone on this island. Somewhere a lone sailor is waiting for us to rescue him." Okay, that is the end of chapter 14. So, we've made another discovery. We found a new kind of part of the island. We found the giant oyster beds, and they've discovered that they're not the only ones on the island. So, chapter 15 is called A Sailor Named Emily. All right, chapter 15, A Sailor Named Emily. And I have up here, in parentheses, Roberta. All right, and I'll explain why. So this is kind of a hard picture to see, but it was hard to find a good image of this. And this is a picture from the movie, and hopefully you will watch the movie when we get done with this. It is on Disney Prime, or Disney Plus, I guess. So, you'll have to look that up. All right, so A Sailor Named Emily. We read and reread the message on the linen cloth to make sure it was real. Our one thought was to search the coast for the smoking rock and to save the poor sailor stranded there. If only we had the bird who delivered this note to us, we could send an answer back, I remarked. "Oh, I do have him, Father. He's tucked down in my sack." Small world here, Fritz said, and returned to his kayak to retrieve the seagull. While Fritz held the bird tightly in his arms, I wrote this short note: "Have faith in God, help is near." I then attached the slip to the seagull's foot and threw the bird up into the air. It flapped its wings and flew off toward the east. Okay, so a long time ago, people would keep birds, usually pigeons, and they were called homing pigeons. And the birds would always return back to their original spot. And people would actually attach little notes to birds, and the birds would travel back and forth, delivering messages, and then they would always return back to their home. And so they're going to kind of try to do this with this seagull. So we mustn't forget the oyster beds, Father, Fritz reminded me as I watched the bird disappear in the distance. After all, it may be soon time before we get an answer to the note, if we get one at all. The three of us spent the entire next day preparing our cargo. Then, with the soft breeze blowing, we too embarked for the eastern coastline. Fritz and Jack led the way in the kayak, while Ernest and I steered the canoes loaded with equipment. And at the last minute, young Nips, the son of our first monkey, hopped in along with Turk and Flora. At last we reached our destination, which was as picturesque as Fritz had described it. As we sailed into the Bay of Pearls, for this is what we named it, we gasped, for the sight we saw took our breath away. We saw huge oyster beds nestled on the ocean floor. We rested that night, and at dawn the next day we began our pearl fishery. With the aid of rakes, hooks, nets, and poles, we soon drew up large quantities of oysters. As they slowly popped open, we were delighted to see that each one contained a priceless cream-colored shining pearl, or pearl shining brilliantly in the tropical sun. That night, as we sat around our campfire discussing the exciting events of the day, we heard terrible noises coming from the jungle. We paid little attention to them until a short while later, when we heard the rustling bushes near our campsite. We looked up, and there in the flickering light stood an enormous lion, crouched down as if he was ready to spring. Just as I was preparing to fire, a shot rang out, and the animal lay dead. "Whew! Bless you, Fritz," I cried. "You have saved us from a horrible death." But Fritz never had time to reply. For the next second, a lioness, probably the mate of the dead lion, came leaping toward his body. She sniffed around the body and licked up his blood. Then she began to howl at the top of her lungs, as if announcing with all those cries that she would devour us. Fritz fired again, and his bullet hit the lioness's shoulder. Now the dogs rushed upon her and seized her flanks. I chose that opportunity to plunge my knife into her, but it was a costly victory. There by the fire slumped our beloved Flora, dead from the wounds of the lioness had inflicted. Oh, poor Flora, wailed Jack. She has done for us tonight what Grizzle did with the boa constrictor years ago. I nodded and said solemnly to my sons, we must give her a proper burial. Flora received the honors of a torchlight burial. We dug a grave and lowered our pet into it. Above the little mound, we erected a flat stone to mark her resting place. On it, we scratched an epitaph. Here lies Flora, a dog, remarkable for her courage and devotion. She died under the claws of a lion, on whom she also inflicted death. But it was with heavy hearts that our canoes and kayaks set sail for Felsenheim at sunrise. As we passed through the stone bridge, Fritz rode up to our canoe and handed me a slip of paper. Then, to my surprise, he shot off like an arrow. I quickly read his message. Dear Father, I'm going alone in search of the sailor. Trust me and wish me luck, Fritz. Oh boy, okay. Although I didn't like the idea of my son undertaking such a risky venture, there was no other course of action but to continue home. Elizabeth was overjoyed with the luxurious lion skins we brought back. Like me, she prayed that Fritz would be successful. 5 days passed and still there was no sign of our son. At Elizabeth's urging, the entire family left on a searching trip around the East Coast in our sailing ship. As we bobbed along in the sea, Ernest suddenly screamed out, "There's a man, a savage, look at him." In the distance, we saw a strange man coming toward us in a canoe. Terror gripped me, for it appeared that we had indeed fallen upon a band of savages. In one last desperate effort to avoid the trouble, I called to the stranger in the Malay language, but he didn't answer. Then I yelled out a few common sailing terms in English, and this time he waved a green branch over his head. Nearer and nearer we came, and finally we recognized the painted savage. It was none other than Fritz. "What are you doing out in this costume?" I called out as we drew up alongside him. I disguised myself because I was afraid I might run into an enemy. For a minute I thought you were one. But let me tell you my good news. I have located the poor lost sailor. "Who is it?" I asked. "What is his name?" Well, the truth is, this sailor is really a girl, and her name is Emily. Now, in the movie, her name is Roberta. And I had a really hard time finding a picture of Emily because I kept searching a sailor named Emily. I got nothing until finally I discovered a sailor named Roberta. So, oh gosh. The truth is, the sailor is really a girl, and her name is Emily, Fritz whispered to me, cupping his hands around his mouth so his voice wouldn't carry. "A girl? I don't believe you," I whispered back, although I don't know why I did so. "It's absolutely true, and a very plucky girl she is too. For 3 years she's been living alone on the smoking rock. Now she's anxious to live with us, but she doesn't want anyone other than you and Mother to know she is a girl. Now, come meet her." We returned to shore to pick up Elizabeth, then followed Fritz. An hour later, we arrived at a nearby island. After docking the ship, Fritz led us through some woods to a hut where a low fire was burning. "Hello?" Fritz called out. Down from a tree jumped a young and handsome sailor. "Hello," she said shyly. "I'm Sir Edward Montrose." Okay. All right, so this is Sir Edward Montrose, also known as Emily, I guess also known as Roberta. When we get a better view of her, this is Emily. Oh, this is Roberta. So, all right, the last chapter of our book is going to be chapter 16, and it's called A Sad Farewell. So, let's do some thinking about what's going to happen. They've been on the island for over 10 years. Emily's been taking care of herself on her little side of the island for 3 years, okay? I could make some predictions. Okay, the next chapter is A Sad Farewell, which makes me think that somebody would be leaving. Maybe it's Emily. Maybe they're able to get her off the island somehow. Or maybe, I don't know, because no one has left the island in 10 years. So you have to think about what a sad farewell means, okay? And, all right, And we'll see what happens now when they meet Emily. All right, so I'm leaving up a chapter 15 picture for a minute because I don't want to show you 16, even though this is going to be chapter 16, a sad farewell. Because we're still talking about Emily, okay? It had been such a long time since we'd seen another human being that for several minutes we all stood spellbound, staring at the handsome young sailor. Finally, Fritz broke the silence. Taking his new friend by the hand, he led her forward. "Father, Mother, please say hello," he urged. "Hello," I said, recognizing immediately that the sailor was a girl. "Welcome to our family," Elizabeth cried warmly. This unexpected tenderness released Emily's pent-up emotions, and she ran into Elizabeth's arms in a flood of tears. "How can I ever thank you for your kindness?" she cried. As she spoke, my sons crowded near, and there were smiles and handshakes all around. Over supper, we all got acquainted. After a while, the newcomer seemed tired, so Elizabeth escorted her down to the ship for the night. For a long time afterward, we sat by the fire discussing this sudden turn of events. In the excitement of relating this adventure, Fritz forgot the secret he was supposed to keep, and that the name Emily slipped out. "Emily!" exclaimed Jack, shocked. "Emily!" cried Francis. "Do you mean to tell me that Sir Edward is really a girl?" "I'm afraid so," answered Fritz. "She pretended to be a boy because the sailor suit is the only outfit she has worn for 3 years. She was too embarrassed to admit that she was a girl until she had a dress to wear." "Well, you'll have to give us time to get used to the idea that Emily is a girl," said Ernest. The next morning when Emily arrived for breakfast, she had removed her sailor's cap and her long blonde curls fell down on her shoulders. My sons were completely tongue-tied in the presence of such a beautiful English girl. "I hope you don't mind my being a girl," Emily said shyly. "Of course not," said Francis. "I'm getting used to the idea already," quipped Ernest. "Everyone is delighted," said Fritz. "Now we're just anxious for you to see Felsenheim. We hope you're going to like it here." "I'm sure I will," Emily replied with a smile on her face. Soon after, we set sail from Emily's island. When she took her first step on the sand of Providence Bay, her new brothers all shouted, "Hurrah! Welcome home!" Fritz took her by the hand and led her up to the grotto. The rest of us followed behind. "Oh, how beautiful!" Emily murmured as she wandered through the rooms, admiring all that we had done. Elizabeth prepared an elegant dinner of roast turkey with truffles, wild rice, and fruit. A double spray of flowers hung over a sign which read, "Welcome, Emily Montrose." As we lingered over dessert, Emily, who seemed more at ease with us now, told us more about herself. "I was born in India of English parents," she began, "but my mother died when I was 3. I was raised by my father, an officer in the British Navy. When he and his regiment were ordered back to England, we sailed on separate ships. It's a rule that women cannot ride on the battleship in time of war. So I boarded a ship whose captain was a good friend of my father's. After a few days, we ran into a storm and we were shipwrecked. Like you, I made my way to this island, but I lay on the beach for a long time near death. When I awoke, I ate shellfish to regain my strength. My training in sports enabled me to build a sturdy hut with a framework of stout poles and bamboo, walls woven with reeds, and a thatched roof of palm leaves and clay. I tamed and trained a cormorant to spear fish, strike down birds, and catch geese, rabbits, and other small animals. So I have never gone hungry or lacked for companionship." So a cormorant is like a bird, a big kind of bird that has a sharp bill, and it usually is found around oceans. It will spear fish, kind of like what a pelican might do, only it doesn't have that big pelican-like sack. It's got more of a pointy beak. All the times I kept a fire burning at the end of the reef, hoping to attract a passing ship. Now I'm lucky enough to be living in your lovely home. "We think we're the lucky ones," Elizabeth said, "for now we have a new daughter." So once Emily came out of her, got rid of her boy clothes, and Elizabeth found her some girl clothes, is where we end up like this. So We now have an adopted sister, cried Francis. Now our life is really complete. Our life went on pleasantly for some time until one day when something happened to change this peaceful existence. On a trip to Shark Island, Jack and Fritz mischievously set off several cannon blasts. To their surprise, they heard an answer in return. Wide-eyed, they returned to inform us of this strange happening. If there really is a ship on our coast, we don't know whether it's manned by Europeans or by Malay pirates, I said. I don't know whether to be happy or sad. We all rushed down to the beach, and there on the coast we spotted a fine European ship sailing toward us. An English flag floated from the masthead. To be on the safe side, we hid in the bushes as the ship dropped anchor and the sailors rowed ashore. They set up tents and roasted meat for dinner. After a while, 2 sentinels spied us, and we came out of hiding. "Welcome, Englishmen," we cried, but they kept their distance and we kept ours. Later, we sailed out to the ship, the Unicorn, and gave the captain a warm welcome. He was relieved to see that we were not savages, and he conducted us to his cabin where a glass of wine sealed our friendship. Good fortune was smiling on us, for the captain, Captain Littleton, was a friend of Commander Montrose, and he eagerly assured Emily that her father was alive. I'm going to now switch over to the last slide, which was really the chapter 16 slide. Okay, oopsie, come on here. A sad farewell. So, you can kind of make some predictions about what you think might be happening now that they've met another ship. Oh gosh, so okay. I also have an Englishman on board I want you to meet, he said, a Mr. Woolston and his wife and 2 daughters. Elizabeth was overjoyed to have company, and she prepared a gala dinner, after which she insisted that the Woolstons stay at Felsenheim. The next morning, Mr. Woolston approached me and said, "My wife and I are so impressed by your life here that we wonder if we too could live on your island." What do you think about that? They kind of got their own our little paradise here. "Of course, my good man," I said, slapping him on the back. "It will be wonderful to have neighbors at long last." Despite my delight at the Woolstons' decision to become citizens of our island, I began to wonder just how wise it would be for my children to live here forever. Okay. Although Elizabeth and I had no desire to return to Europe, I thought our sons should at least be offered the opportunity. I gathered my family together and discussed the matter with them frankly. Ernest and Jack immediately stated that they were content here, but Fritz fell silent. After a bit, he confessed that he and Francis would like to sail back to Europe together. For 8 days, the Unicorn remained at anchor while we packed a valuable cargo of pearls, spices, furs, and ivory for our sons to sell in Europe. And then came the day when the ship was to sail. A cannon blast announced the hour of departure. After many handshakes and tender hugs, Fritz and Francis climbed aboard. They stood on the deck, waving goodbye. "Have a good trip," we cried as the Unicorn slowly slipped away. We watched until the ship was merely a black speck on the horizon. "Goodbye, my sons," Elizabeth and I whispered, brushing away the tears. It was a sad moment, for we knew in our hearts that we had said our last farewell to Europe and our beloved Switzerland. The end of Swiss Family Robinson. So, I hope you enjoyed this story. There was certainly lots of adventure and lots of things that happened. I don't know if this is something you would ever think would be fun, to be stranded kind of on a desert island, and could you survive and could you make it work? These guys happen to be really handy and seem to just be able to hunt and fish and build things and cook and weave their own clothes. So they really were a pretty talented family, and all the different adventures they had. The 2 older boys decided they wanted to leave and go back. Now, it doesn't say in our book, of course, Emily went with them because she, though, wanted to find her father. So it doesn't mention anything about whether they will return. You know, that would probably be Swiss Family Robinson, you know, continued. However, if you like this, I will say that when you watch the movie, there are going to be some similarities, just like always happens with a book and a movie. There are going to be some real significant differences that I think you're going to like even more. I was surprised when I read this because I've seen the movie a couple times, but I don't think that I've read it before now. And there definitely are parts in the movie that were not in the book, and you'll like those parts a lot. So, and there were parts in the book that are not in the movie. So it's worth watching. So anyhow, hope you enjoyed Swiss Family Robinson, and hope I will have a chance to talk to you guys about, you know, the book and what you liked and didn't like. Please tell me, okay, and let me know so I know if these are things we want to kind of keep doing, books like this or something. Thanks, everyone.